keep fighting. I translate my frustrations into a fight. We just can't switch off that praise. Yes, I don't want us to be happy with this whole, how nice it is, and then we come the next day, find it has been run down. No.
Right, that was President Paul Kagame in the 2015 National Leadership Retreat, definitely giving a stern message as far as whether praise is what we need to see on the government leaders or, taking them head on their performance. And of course, this leadership retreat is all about accountability on leaders. And let me now bring in our panelists. AIM's Next Eastern Forum. Thank you for joining us on the program, Natalie.
Thank you for having me.
A long time coming, eh?
Yes.
Very elusive. Eh?
Sorry, I've been elusive, yes.
Yes, okay. Thank you so much for joining us. Also with us is Dr. Joseph Gurunziza, Executive Director, Never Again Rwanda from the Civil Society Platform. I know. How are you doing? How are you doing? This is good to have you on the show.
No, thank you.
All right.
It's a pleasure.
Good. We'll be getting your perspective on this from a civil society perspective. Also with us from the location of the National Leadership Retreat is none other than Ambassador Olivier Nduhungirehe, who is the Minister of State in Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Cooperation and East African Community. Thank you for joining us from Gabiro.
Thank you for having me, Eugene.
I think I should just start with you. If you watched the intro of the show, definitely we saw the tone of President Paul Kagame in 2015 during the National Leadership Retreat. And of course, it was a stern kind of tone, definitely looking at the performance of the leaders as far as whether we should be looking at the success more than the failures of some of the government leaders. I want to hear from you, Ambassador Olivier, what you think the mood and the tone based on the performance so far of the government leaders meeting there will be from your own perspective. Ambassador Olivier.
Thank you very much, Eugene. I think this 15th National Leadership Retreat is an important one because it's the first retreat after the adoption of the National Strategy for Transformation 2017-2024. And I think it will be a good opportunity for all leaders here in Gabiro to think on how to implement that NST1, the National Strategy for Transformation, in order to achieve our goals. You know that we have now 2 years until the end of our Vision 2020, and this strategy will also run until 2024, and the first 4 years of our Vision 2050. I think it will be a good start to see how we can implement our vision, our strategy, so that we can implement our two visions, the remainder of the Vision 2020 and then our Vision 2050.
Right, perfect. Of course, we will be hearing also from the other panelists in studio, but what we understand is that among the topics that will be focused on, which we're also putting our eye on, is Rwanda in Africa and beyond. And of course, this session is aimed at looking or discussing Rwanda's role in the continent, particularly in light with the continual striving for self-reliance. I want to take you back to what we know so far as Rwanda's relations are concerned with its neighbors. Before we even go far out of Africa, let's start off with the East African community. Just next door in Burundi, we also have some issues. Of course, what we have seen happening across in 2016 when the country decided to ban some exports of some products into Rwanda due to what they called not so good relations with Rwanda. I want to hear what this leadership retreat will be looking at to avoid such or to deal with such issues as far as relations are concerned with our neighbors.
Thank you. We have one of the sessions, the last one actually, is a session on Rwanda in Africa and beyond. We'll discuss broadly about how, as Africans, as Pan-Africanists, we can tap into homegrown solutions to achieve self-reliance. I don't think that will address particular issues regarding our neighbors, but definitely regional integration will be part of that session, of that discussion. And you said it right. We still have difficulties with some of our neighbors regarding our integration agenda within the East African community. There are the non-tariff barriers, which is that still exists between some of EAC partner states. And as you said it, we have difficulties on our border with Burundi because we don't trade as we should, because we are in the same common market, and we should be trading with each other. But the presentation will be broad about the role of Rwanda in Africa and beyond.
Mm-hmm. Great. I want you to just stay with us because in the course of the program we'll also be seeking to get interventions as far as the conversation is concerned from the studio and also from where you are, and we'll also be joined by a communication specialist, Edward Wanyonyi, who's in Nairobi, to give us a perspective from the regional perspective on how the region perceives this kind of activity. Natalie, I want to take or read your thoughts on this, picking up from what the Honorable Minister has actually said, with focus on Rwanda in Africa and beyond. What sort of communication, what sort of discussions or expectations would you be specific, or they may go specific into issues, but what would be your concerns, especially looking at the real events or the unfolding of events? What we saw in, let's say, in the IALA session a few weeks ago during the vote for the speaker, we saw how geopolitics plays a hand in either stalling or making easy decisions as far as the region is concerned. They walked out, the delegation from Burundi walked out, paralyzing that particular program. What kind of answers, what kind of solutions are you expecting out of the leadership retreat as far as this topic is concerned?
Well, not being at the leadership retreat, I can't speak to that, but I can say that obviously within our regional dynamics, there are challenges that are of a political nature and there are challenges that are of a structural nature, I would say. And I think that our leaders have to work on both areas, but I think that the areas of political nature are quite important. I mean, in the area where I work in science, for example, when we talk about the knowledge-based economy, for example, we have many African countries, especially in our region, have a lot of theories about that, but you find that a lot of the challenges that exist are of a structural nature, but mostly of a political nature, because once leaders are involved or have the political will to push forward, as we saw with the corridor projects, things get done. I think regional dynamics and politics will always be a part of, it has happened even in regional blocs like the EU. There continues to be friction among neighbors because you are neighbors, therefore you continue to have issues on your borders. But I think that our leaders in the region finding common purpose, common projects to work on for our common good is the way to go. And I believe our leaders are doing that. They're doing a frontal discussion as well as diplomacy, which is what is required. We have so many challenges. As you know, that on the West African bloc, they're doing a lot more. They're getting advanced more, whereas infrastructure projects, their monetary union, etc., they're much more advanced, and the East African Union has a lot to do to catch up.
Right. And of course, if we look at it from the civil society perspective, I want to read your thoughts also, Dr. Joseph. How do you, first of all, read the tone, the objectives, and of course, the kind of focus areas as far as this leadership retreat is concerned from a civil society perspective? You do follow up on issues of health. You do look at issues of access to major basic needs for the people, not just in Rwanda but of course across the region. What sort of solutions also are you expecting out of this leadership retreat in these areas?
Yeah, thanks a lot. Of course, I can say that it's work in progress. There are lots of challenges. What the development we want or the interventions that are needed, they all result from the economy. Mm-hmm. So if the economy is not moving the way it should, then the achievements or the improvement in the health services, the citizen participation might not be achieved. So that's why I'm saying that I'm not expecting solution 1, 2, 3, but the most essential thing is that the government is taking time to sit and look at what has been achieved in the last 12 months, and also what are the challenges that they've undergone and what are the plans ahead. So that alone indicates that there is accountability and also transparency, because at times if people don't sit and look at where they are coming from
and where they're going,
so it's very hard to achieve universal health care, or even to achieve the real meaningful citizen participation. So to me, I think the solutions might come even in 2 years or 3 years, but the most essential thing is that they are sitting and they are having a reflection on what they've planned and looking forward to 2020 and also 2050. So it's great that they have time to sit and forge the way forward.
Some of those issues. Let me bring back the Honourable Minister. If you're still with us, I'm sure my panelists have also talked about some of the things that they expect and some of the projections or expectations that might not really be seen immediately. But I know for sure, or in one way or another, this issue might come up in the leadership retreat. You might correct me if you can, or tell me if it's part of the agenda. The issue, when we talk about Rwanda in Africa and beyond, of course, we are also looking at the kind of image that Rwanda is building for itself, the kind of brand we want out there. When people talk about Rwanda, what should they be saying? What should they be thinking about? Outlets has been this issue of the immigration issue, the immigration question. Rwanda has offered in many ways to support African victims of human trafficking in one or another. And of course, this issue has been received with mixed reactions, especially when it comes to the issue of Israel, the Israeli immigrants. I want to hear from you, Ambassador Olivier. Rwanda says that, the Israeli immigration issue is not our problem. For us, we're just opening doors for people or those who are feeling like they are being affected where they are and they feel like they want to come to a place where they can call home. Based on our historical background, we are ready to take them in. This story or this narrative or this explanation doesn't seem to be sinking in the hearts or in the minds of so many people, because today as we speak, an Israeli newspaper called Mariv Reports says that an Israeli security mission made a secret visit to Rwanda last week in an effort to sell weapons and military technology to the country. And it's important for us to understand, what is the real issue here? How are you going, as leaders, when you meet, going to think about how to deal with this issue and get it off the way, Ambassador Olivier?
First of all, the policy of Rwanda is an open policy regarding migrants who have difficulties in the countries they fled to. And this is informed by our history, of course, because we have experienced exile in the last, since the 60s and up to 94, but also our policy is informed by our values to open our arms to people in need, people who want a shelter. So this is what we said about the African migrants who were stranded in Libya, who were enslaved in Libya. We say that we were ready for those who want to come to Rwanda and to receive up to 30,000. We were very clear about that. Regarding the migrants who are in Israel, I think there are a lot of fake news that were around this story. Because, first of all, we didn't have any deal or secret deal with Israel. We have an open policy for every African migrant who want to come to Rwanda, who express the will to come to Rwanda. We will receive them, but we will never take any migrant who is deported against his or her will. This is very clear. We have been reading many things in the newspaper, in Israeli newspaper. Everything is fake. Our policy is clear. It's only those who will come here voluntarily without any form of constraint.
Right.
Thank you.
And so do you agree? Do you agree that in one way or another, this is an issue that Rwanda should be putting its energy on to clear its name from what you've called fake news reporters? I mean, is it something that you're going to be putting your energy on, or you feel that let those who want to talk, let them talk, but what we know is exactly what we are saying?
We have already issued two statements as a government, and there was also a statement issued by the Office of the Prime Minister of Israel. So, for the situation in Israel, if they have any internal issue regarding the problem of migrants, it's not Rwanda's problem. We have our own policy to receive people or migrants who want to come to Rwanda. Any problem regarding policies of any other countries, it's not our problem.
Right. Let me bring in our panelists in studio also to just try to put their thoughts on this. Dr. Joseph, from a civil society perspective, looking at this issue, do you feel that it's one of those issues that would taint the image of Rwanda in one or another, because we're looking at Rwanda in Africa and beyond? What sort of effects do you think it would have on Rwanda, if any, if things remain the way they are, if we still continue seeing reports which the ambassador says is usually fake news? Does Rwanda stand to lose in any way if things remain the way they are right now?
To me, what I can say is that from the civil society perspective is that I think what the government has come up with is great, because within our history, some part of our population were refugees for almost 32 years or even 35 years, just because of funny politics. So they understand the consequences of being a refugee. So that's why they've opened up the borders, so that if there is any African who has... Again, of course, to me, I would say that there is also some politics around those who might not be happy with maybe the stand that the government has taken. Because as Africans, why should we have our fellow Africans dying in Libya, or maybe trying to cross borders and going to Europe or US? So if African leaders can be able to create favorable environments in our countries, then we wouldn't be seeing Africans suffering in other countries, or maybe Europe, or maybe Middle East. So I think I wouldn't say that some people would be happy with the stand that the government has taken, because in politics, some people want always brand themselves as people are doing great. So some institutions or some countries or some media organs might try to
be out to taint the image of Rwanda.
The image of Rwanda. But then I think Rwanda as a country and with a visionary leadership, they have to stand on what they've decided, as long as it's in the interest of the African people.
Right. Natalie, I mean, is Rwanda does Rwanda stand to be a victim of circumstances in this? You know, I've come as a country to say, you know what, based on my historical background, I cannot sit and see my fellow, you know, human being undergo inhuman acts. And then at the end of the day, Rwanda becomes, you know, a victim of this, being seen. I mean, do you also read it in the same direction?
Well, it's not the first time that Rwanda has to deal with fake news. I think we've been dealing with fake news for quite a long time. And so there's finding that balance between responding to every fake news that comes out and actually responding to things that are of importance. And I think that there's never a good response to that. You have to find a balance as a government. But I want to broaden the discussion a little bit, because I think the way that migration is being discussed, it's very much a simplistic view, because they are refugees who are enslaved in Libya, but they're also refugees because of migration. And then if we broaden the discussion even further, they're expatriates who are migrants who come to Africa from other places, and they're considered expatriates, whereas if it's the opposite, they're considered refugees and economic migrants. And so we also have to talk about the terminology that's used around migration and talk about the bias specifically related to Africa, because even when people who are migrating here for economic reasons, they're called expatriates when they're coming to Africa. So I think we should not fall into the simplistic discussion about what is happening. And I think in terms of Africa, we have to broaden that discussion. Yes, it's true we have to make the economic environment, the development environment, so that people are staying. But I also believe in mobility. I think that's one of the strengths of developing the continent, is that I should be able to wake up today and say, I want to go work in Ghana because my skills are specifically important there. And this also heavily affects research mobility. And we need the strength that comes together with collaboration, whether it's in scientific research, whether it's in investments, etc. And we can only do that if there is opening up of our borders, of our skies, etc. So I don't think we should fall into this simplistic discussion. We have to broaden the discussion and also point out the biases that are happening towards Africa, because why should I not be called an expatriate when I go live in Canada, for example?
Indeed, and of course it's really significant that we have that perspective as well. Ambassador, if you're also still there with us, one thing that is also very important when we're looking at this particular topic of Rwanda in Africa and beyond is also considering the state of the citizens of Rwanda from whatever part of the world that they're living, especially when it comes to those who want to work outside of Rwanda. And I want to bring your attention to this issue, which I believe is not a new issue. It's something that, you know, communication has also been given towards it. And it's the issue of Uganda, which I would like you to just make it clear, give us the official perspective of the state of affairs as far as Rwanda-Uganda relations are concerned as well. And as you go to this retreat, what sort of reports will you be looking at? What sort of conversations will you be having as far as strengthening these issues of the relations between these two countries are concerned? There are reports or claims that things are not standing out well as far as Rwanda and Uganda is concerned. And there is even a report of a protest letter that was sent to Uganda over the arrest and deportation of some citizens who were doing business in Uganda. I'd like to hear how you would describe the relations between Rwanda and Uganda today.
We have, I would say, difficult relations lately, and you said it about Rwandan citizens in Uganda who were arrested. And we have been engaging the government of Uganda to try to solve this issue. And our head of state met twice in Addis Ababa in the margins of the last AU summit. And we hope that the situation will evolve positively.
All right. Just for purposes of avoiding speculation, I would like you to also clear the air on the fact that there are reports that probably the issues could not just be about this deportations or the arrest of these locals, but there are those who feel that it emanates from the issues of, some deals that Rwanda and Uganda did agree on as far as regional projects are concerned, and Uganda did decide to pick on a different partner without consulting Rwanda. I'm talking about the oil pipeline and also the power generation projects that Uganda decided to actually go with South Sudan, leaving Rwanda sort of hanging. I mean, could this be part of the reasons as to why things are not looking out good in the relations between Rwanda and Uganda?
But Rwanda and Uganda, we are neighbors and we are members of both partner states of the East African Community. And of course, one of the projects of integration in our region is infrastructure. And the Standard Gauge Railway from Mombasa to Kigali through Nairobi and Kampala. So we have some of those projects who are still ongoing, who have encountered difficulties, and we are continuing within the EAC, but also bilaterally, to try to solve those issues, because it is important that if we are partners in a community as the East African Community, we need to promote those projects. We can't have integration without those infrastructure projects. So we had recently, I think a few days ago, a summit of the East African Community in Kampala. There was even a retreat on infrastructure and health, financing and development. So we are still partner. We have some challenges in implementing some of those projects, and I think we will continue to see how to solve those challenges and put in place those projects that are so important for the integration of our region.
Yeah. Is it possible to tell us what those challenges are and how probably you will be looking ahead as you meet in dealing with them?
So, the integration agenda of the East African Community has 4 pillars. There are the customs union, there was the common market, then the monetary union, and the political federation. We are now at the stage of common market. But even that common market, meaning free movement of people, of goods, of capital, have challenges between different partner states. Mm-hmm. We are not at the same level. For example, we have what we call one network area, mm-hmm. whereby we removed roaming fees between partner states, but there are only 3 countries that are part of that, mm-hmm. what we call variable geometry. So some of partner states get together to implement some of the project for our integration. So we still have issues, difficulties in implementing even the protocols we have signed regarding the common market. So we are discussing with partner states about how to fast track all those projects, including the infrastructure project, so that we get to the next stage, which is monetary union.
Right. All right. Let's try and read your minds on this particular issue as far as the issue of projects within the regions are concerned, and the effect that they have as far as the relations between the East African countries are concerned, what they have. Looking forward, Natalie, I mean, how can the region be able to read this issue of what we read in some, papers, speculations of, mistrust, some in a cunning way, today we agree that we'll do this together, tomorrow I've picked Uganda to be my partner. How would this be dealt with, and what sort of impact do you see it having moving forward?
Well, I think it's, like I said earlier, there's political issues and there's structural issues. I think implementation is a general issue everywhere in Africa. Whether you sign a protocol, you sign an agreement, the strength of that agreement is how you implement it. And, one of the things I admire about our president is his emphasis on implementation. And his comments to Mwenda was accurate to say it's good that sense of urgency is lacking in the relations in our union, because these infrastructure projects are really important not only for the development of the union, but in the development of individual nations and their people. So it's very, I think these issues of political nature, it's about implementation, and I think they will continue to be there in different forms as we continue. And I think we have to continue to do the way they're doing, deal with diplomatically, as well as to have people who are, I would say, at the mid-level leadership to continue to work on ironing out these issues and working, because it's in all our interests. I mean, if we do not get that standard railway, it doesn't just affect the person at the start, it affects us at the end. And I think that changing our minds and saying I have a better partner in this one is fine, but I think we have to think about also the spirit in which the union was created. It's also on a Pan-African level. We have to think about that even at the African Union. We are doing this because it's good for our people, it's good economically, but it's also good for us as a union, because we are Pan-African. We're more alike than we are different.
Right, and of course also looking at this, there are some also positives that news that come out of Rwanda. For example, Transparency International's Corruption Perception Index, which ranks Rwanda as least corrupt. We also have one that says that Rwanda is actually most secure country, top 20.
Yes. Ninth, actually.
Yes, number 9. And when you look at this, Rwanda can't do it alone. If Rwanda is secure, but your neighbor is not secure, it affects the people of Rwanda who are actually trying so hard to be, law-abiding citizens. So looking forward, basing on this topic of Rwanda in Africa and beyond, for how long will Rwanda continue doing it on its own? And doesn't that strain the will and the spirit of Rwandans who want to see a better Africa when the dream is not shared across the globe? Dr. Joseph.
Yeah, one maybe before coming to what you've asked, that at times we need also to look at the context. As you might be knowing, it's almost now, it's coming to 24 years after the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi. So basically the country started from zero. And two, as I said at the start, some Rwandans never had an opportunity to have a country for almost 35 years. So when you look at Rwanda and these other neighboring countries, they have different history and different context. So I would say that in Rwanda, we have the Rwandan leaders are statesmen, because a statesman is someone who has no constituency. He looks at the entire, he works for the entire nation. So thinking and planning what is good for the country. So the politics are different. We have consensual consultations. People sit, you remember after, during the 1997, 98, the country had Rugwiro discussions. People sat and could ask themselves, what do we want?
Right.
What should we do?
Right.
So given the context of Rwanda, that makes it unique, and that makes people work so that they can be able to achieve what other countries had maybe achieved in the last 40 years. So, but again, coming back to what you had asked, that shouldn't stop Rwanda doing the right things, because you can you can mentor others, right. You can other people can learn from you, and you can influence quietly your neighbors, as long as you are always on the right track. So I think Rwanda needs to stay focused, keep doing the right things. So we are seeing people shifting and requesting for residence in Rwanda. Why? Because because of the infrastructure development, because of the policy, the conducive policy.
Most of the things that are not where they are.
Yeah, so I think they shouldn't be discouraged with fun regional. I know the regional dynamics or regional politics might affect your plans, but they might not affect your vision. So I think the leadership needs to stay focused.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I just wanted to say that I think the expectation of difficulty should always be there when you're talking about integration. Mm-hmm. And that's at a regional level, but also much more at an African Union. President Kagame is the chair of the African Union. We should not and saying we are pro President Kagame and his vision, and implementation there's also quite a bit of a distance between that depending on the different countries. I think there has to be an expectation of difficulty and trying to balance pushing ahead with trying to get people as allies on board as we go forward. But you know, some of these things that people are saying in the media that President Kagame is forcing his way through were adopted before he became chair. And so we have to have an ongoing discussion about some of the things that we agreed to as a union. These are the things that we want to open up our skies. We want to, increase trade. These are things that we have to keep repeating, that we have agreed to do these things despite the difficulty, and moving ahead with the people who want to move ahead. I think if we wait until 54 countries, 55 countries decide that they're going to go ahead, it's never going to work.
It's never going to work. Right. Ambassador, I want to bring you back, if you're still there with us, of course, with what Natalie has just brought up on the issue of expecting, difficulties. And this brings us to the issue of, where we see Rwanda moving forward as far as President Paul Kagame being the chair of the African Union. There are those who feel that we will make some enemies along the way as far as, other African nations are concerned because of their way of doing things that might not agree with, President Paul Kagame's style of implementation of things. I want to read from you or hear from you from a government perspective or from a personal perspective as well. What are those challenges? What are those difficulties that you are expecting Rwanda to get in as far as Rwanda being or having the chairperson coming from Rwanda?
Thank you. There are two issues here. There is the chairmanship of the African Union, and we have so many reforms to implement this year, including the Continental Free Trade Area that will be launched in Kigali next month in an extraordinary summit. There was the free movement of people and good and capital that was adopted during the summit. There was a single African air transport market that was also launched. That is the chairmanship of Rwanda for this year 2018. Beside that, there is also the AU institutional reform. You know that President Kagame was selected by his peers as the leader of this reform in 2016 in Kigali in July 2016. That was before his election as chairman of the African Union. And of course, reform is something important, but also difficult, because there are countries, of course, who are not used to that, used to reform. But in any case, we need to reform ourselves, and it's really important. What we want to achieve is to focus as Africans on priority areas that have a continental scope, and then to align AU institutions to those priorities. And third, to reform the management of our union, be it at the political level or at the operational level. And then the last one, which was commented in the press, is the financial autonomy of our organization, because it's unacceptable that a continent of more than 1 billion people, 55 countries, still depends on donors, on partners at more than 75%. So there was that proposal of a levy of 0.2% on eligible imports to finance our activities. So, and of course we had, during the last summit in Addis, there was countries that expressed concern not on the content, not on the proposal, but on the process. Some were even requesting to refer the matter to ambassadors in Addis so that they discuss and then they submit it to the ministers and then to the head of state. But we already took a decision at the level of head of state last year in January to have that levy. So I'm not surprised by the reluctance of some countries to embrace the reform, but we believe that we will get there. We have the head of state have appointed a committee of ministers, of 15 ministers, 3 per region, to discuss further the matter of AU institutional reform. I recall that we had already another committee of 15 ministers of finance this time to implement these.
We have many reforms, as you said, and President Paul Kagame being at the helm of the AU chairmanship for just 1 year. And the question has always been, will he be able to do this within this time frame? And are we going to see a situation where there's too much pressure for him to actually push for the full implementation of these reforms because he actually played a key role in having them there, to the extent or at the expense of, us seeing him around and for more Rwandans seeing him around? Is this what you also read? How would you explain this to people who have this perception?
Obviously, it will be difficult to implement the reform in only 1 year because it's a long-term process, but it's important to start the process. We have decisions that were taken by head of state, and I think they will start being implemented this year and the following years. But of course, chairing the African Union is something important and challenging. But of course, all heads of state don't have that chance of chairing the African Union. But it is important that the men that head of state have selected to spearhead the reforms is also the one to chair the African Union this year. So, and we know that President Kagame will try to implement that reform with the support of all heads of state, because it's a collective effort. He's the chair of the African Union, but of course we need the support of other heads of state. And for the levy, the 0.2%, we have already 21 countries that have started implementing that. So it's very encouraging, and then we hope that many other will join that process.
Right. Perfect. I want to just bring in our viewers who are watching us via, online, of course, those who are tweeting us, and it's time to just read a few of those tweets. Let me just jump very quickly to our board right here on this TV here. Of course, all you need to do is just use the hashtag InFocusRW. We'll be able to read some of those tweets as they come in. One of them is right here from Joel, who's at Joel Blank 1085, and he says, "Sir, are there any sanctions in place when a country doesn't abide to any signed agreement? If so, how are they implemented?" I think this is very important. Ambassador, if you're there, are you able to respond to this, especially when it comes to some of the Rwandan spearheaded reforms? When we talk of Rwanda in Africa and beyond, if there are leaders or countries that are not able to abide by these agreements, what usually happens to them? Very quickly, Ambassador, if you can.
Thank you. Usually, at the level of the African Union, heads of state have taken many decisions, and a number of them were not implemented. Usually, what is required is consensus, and then if some countries don't implement those reforms, we support them to implement the reform. For example, for this levy, there are countries that have expressed concern regarding their particular situation, and the Commission, the African Union Commission, is there to help them implement, put in place that levy. So it's rather by consensus of helping each other rather than imposing sanctions.
Right. So we should not expect sanctions in that sense. Another one right here from Cedric. It should first start with leaders first before corporations among member states become confrontation. For example, the problem of Rwanda and Uganda insists that the leaders first have to agree to, cooperate in order to avoid what we are seeing out there. My panelists right here in studio, do you buy into that idea? I mean, do you see this as an issue of if we had actually agreed before, then we might not spill this over into a country confrontation form?
Well, I think it's quite controversial because people complain that a lot is dependent on leaders, and then they say, but leaders should fix everything. I think there has to be two levels. We have to work to strengthen, like he said, through the reforms, strengthen the AU Commission to align with the priorities and follow up implementation. And then there can always be dialogue at the leadership level. Some leaders that started the year are not here anymore, so there has to be more than just relying on leaders, even though political will and follow-up at the head of state level, ministerial level is very important for the implementation of reforms. I think there has to be some citizen engagement, some pressure from citizens for the implementation of things that are like a common trade area, the common market that's important to us. We have to find a way to make sure that we are also involved in doing this at our level.
Leaders are part of the society, so there is need for ownership from citizens. That means even Africans in general.
Right.
Because if any leader is selected or elected from those informed citizens, things are going to be a bit smooth. But if people expect leaders to be taking each and every decision, then the sustainability and also the continuity of some of the policies, it will be a bit hard. So there is need for civic engagement and also to make sure that civil society are active when it comes to some of these protocols and also policies.
So that they play that watchdog role in implementation.
Definitely, yeah.
Right. Of course, Ambassador, I would love to also pick your thoughts on that as we part, as we leave each other, of course, from studio and where you are. I want to hear your parting shot. What are you promising Rwandans, especially those who are watching us from abroad, when they think of their country back home, where it is supposed to be placed in the world, its position in Africa and the rest of the world? What would you tell them as your parting shot as we move?
Thank you. Rwanda is well positioned. We have made tremendous efforts since the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi. We are in process of economic transformation, of openness, of promotion of human rights and women's rights. We are well positioned in our region, and we have a leadership position, be it in the region and also on the continent. So we think that we will leverage diplomacy to tap into this regional, continental, and global integration. And you know that the aim of our diplomacy is economic diplomacy. To promote investment, to promote cooperation and tourism in Rwanda. This is what we are doing. And as we move toward the end of, toward the the deadline for the Vision 2020, I think we will move ahead. And this national leadership retreat is also aimed at strategizing for the next years to come.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Of course, thank you for joining us all the way from the location of the leadership retreat. I also want to say thank you to our panelists in studio. Due to time, of course, we were also not able to get in touch due to technical issues with Edward Wanyonyi, who's in Nairobi. We had expected to have him on the show via Skype, but that was not able to come through. We're hoping that we'll be able to deal with that in the next episode. We have other topics being covered in the National Leadership Retreat, which we will also bring on the table. Keep talking to us. The hashtag is InFocusRW. We'll see you again next week, same time, same place. As always, my name is Eugene Anangwe. Good night.
Rwanda, renowned for its tremendous ability to fulfill your dreams, invites you to connect more with your friends and family in Europe with 3 weekly flights to